holding off on giving feedback to a team member? This is a video you'll definitely want to watch. If you're a manager and you're watching this and thinking, wait, is she just talking to me? No, I'm not just talking to you. Well, I am talking to you. But pretty much every manager goes through this at some point in time, where you have feedback and you think, okay, I want to give it to a team member, but you may think to yourself, well, it's towards the end of the week. I don't want to ruin their weekend. I'll handle it next week. And then Monday you may think, oh, I wish I'd handled that last week. And it can go on because things get busy or you don't know how to say it, or you may be afraid someone's going to cry. But overall, you're likely holding off on giving feedback just because of the things in your head, and you may intend to give it, but time goes on. So in addition to talking about why it happens, in this video, I'll break down what to do. Because the key part is to reframe. Think to yourself, if your boss had feedback and they really felt like you needed to hear it, but they were holding off on it because things were busy or because they were afraid they'd hurt your feelings or make you cry, what would you say? Probably something like, well, I'd want to hear it, but I'd also want to hear it in a way that maybe wouldn't make me feel attacked or beat down or be upset or things like that. Say it in a way and also make it a conversation. Maybe get my input or give me things to work on. But overall, if you flip it from your mindset as a manager of holding off on things based on all sorts of things, whether it's busy or you don't know how to say it or you're afraid of hurting the other person's feelings, flip it and put yourself in that person's shoes and think about what you'd want. Because often it's just that. As a team member, whether you're a manager or any other level, other people likely are going to have feedback or thoughts about your performance or your communication style or other things at points in time. And sometimes there's no need to say it because it may be a one-time interaction. But especially as someone's manager, you're not just shaping the work they do literally today, you're shaping the work they do altogether in this job, but also the way they act the entire time at your organization and things in their career. And so if you have things and you see that and think, okay, they really need to hear this, then thinking about how can I say it in a way that's caring? So the first step is to have the conversation. So, first is to think about reframing it and really think about why you're holding off on it. And also on the other side, how would you feel if you were that team member and your boss was holding back on feedback for you? And the natural thought to yourself, okay, well then how can I say it in a way that doesn't make them feel under attack? One thing is, as you think about how to have the conversation, is knowing that when you're working with humans, people may have all types of reactions and remembering why that is. You may have some team members that literally have never shed a tear in the workplace. You may have others that it seems like anytime they catch a whiff that's something negative, they start to cry. But knowing that a big reason of that is work is already a big part of people's lives. It's how they pay for their life, how they support their families. A lot of people, it's some of their identity and how they feel. So when they get negative criticism at work or criticism altogether, they can be afraid, am I going to lose my job? Or, okay, does my boss think I'm an idiot? All of these really natural thoughts. And so you as a manager, you not only shape what messages you deliver, but how you deliver them. And so using that first step, that consideration of, okay, if I'd want my boss to give me this feedback, but also do it in a caring way and having a conversation, one of the first things you can do in setting up that conversation is to think about, okay, what am I noticing and objectively noticing? Also to think to yourself, what are the things I may not know? Because as a manager or just as a human being, you may have at times preferences for things. And I've done a video about needs versus preferences. And one of the things that can be really helpful as a manager is to think about, like, what are things I do it a certain way, but other people could do it differently. It's just not how I would do it. So really thinking to yourself and for your teams of talking about what needs to happen and what they can actually decide, and maybe differently than the way you would do it. But when you're giving that feedback, is to think, what's the information that you definitely have? Like if someone gives you a report and there's typos in it, okay, that's pretty much objective. Or if someone's a sales employee, they're not hitting their targets. You know that, you know those numbers. But you may not always know the story behind that. So, for example, in the typos, okay, I see this has all sorts of typos, but what you may not know absolutely everything else that they had going on. They may be trying to hit a deadline and rushing through it and trying to get it done. Of course, there's things that you want to tell them about making sure no matter what's going on, you're double checking your work, but really having a sense to yourself of why that may have happened. That's not just that they don't care or that they're just careless. They may have felt rushed and trying to get through all sorts of things at once. Or for that sales employee, you may say, okay, they're not hitting their target, but you don't know the story behind that. What are they doing from a sales activity perspective? Have there been any changes? What is some of the information that you may not know that doesn't show up readily when you just look at their figures? And for other employees, things may be, someone's working style or communication style. Sometimes those can be a little harder to describe, but really thinking to yourself, okay, what do I know that absolutely they need to change or do differently? Also thinking to yourself, what kind of training have they had? Especially if it's something that they need to learn on the job. Have they really learned it? And so going into that, to think to yourself, what do I know and what do I not necessarily know? And knowing that a huge part of it is asking questions. And so to your team members, you set up the conversation and give that feedback. Thinking about, how do I have this conversation? And not just soften it. So it's not just a compliment sandwich, like, I think you're doing this well, this needs work, and I think this is also going well. If you use that framework, then sometimes people don't actually get the message. Like, they don't understand what you're trying to say, and they may miss the meat in the middle of that sandwich, meaning the message that you're really trying to get. You're just trying to soften it on each end. And so making sure for yourself, okay, if I want to pay attention or call their attention to something specifically, how do I bring that attention? And it can help from a human being to know that your team members, when you start to give critical feedback, they may be afraid immediately that they're going to lose their job. And so the ways that you can couch that, if it's something minor, saying, hey, you're doing well on XYZ, but I wanted to call your attention to this because there have been some errors in this, and I just want to talk through and get your perspective and talk about next steps, or just talk through and get your perspective. But think about how to set up that conversation, and you can think about how to do that in a way that shows it is a conversation, not just coming down on them. Because sometimes when you do that, you may end up making assumptions and haven't had all that information. And so first is telling them why you're having the conversation. If you have those one-on-ones, in a recent video I talked about this, about why it's important to have those one-on-one conversations, and that feedback is a two-way street, that you give them positive feedback and also critical things when you're pointing it out. Again, you're doing that to really build them up in this job and their career. And so saying, yeah, I wanted to point this out, but then also asking from your perspective, I want to talk through, like, for example, with the typos, like here, there's a number of typos in them, and saying, I know that can happen sometimes if you're rushed or you haven't taken a second look at it, but I just wanted to talk through and get your perspective before making any assumptions about why those happened. And that can help. And also even adding to things, like depending on who it's going to, like if it's an external client, saying, when clients look at this, for better or for worse, if they see typos in it, that can make them question everything about working with us, and especially if they see multiple of them. And that's just something to keep in mind. But even if it's an internal audience, sometimes people will say, like, well, why does it matter? It's not external facing. Saying just internally, everything we do, getting in the habit of proofreading and making sure it's typo free as much as possible. Like, yeah, things may happen, but there are a number of typos in this. And that can also likewise make people think like, oh, you didn't put effort into this or pay as much attention, because we're having a conversation, but other people might make assumptions. And so it is important to double check and talk through, and we can talk about that. And so giving the context of why it matters as well, but then asking for their perspective. Because sometimes people may just say, well, yeah, I was really busy. Sorry, I don't have time to proofread, but that's why we have technology. Okay. You may say, I know we're busy. We can talk about your workload, absolutely. But when it comes to things like typos, it is important. And there's things we can do. So whether that is running through a spell check on software, or if you have an AI tool, taking it and running it through AI to say, do you see any typos? That's something you can do, especially if that's an approved system that people can run things through. And so thinking about how you leverage technology for things like that. Also tips. I remember years ago, someone told me this tip and said, it actually helps me at times if I've just read something on the screen. If I print it out and then read it printed out, then sometimes I'll catch things, or whether it's a typo, it reads differently. That's always stuck with me. I also, I live in Atlanta. I donate to Trees Atlanta because I feel badly about printing things out repeatedly. Also, sometimes I know people don't always have access to printers, but those types of tips to say, whether it's walking away from it for a few minutes and coming back, or printing it out, or leveraging technology, whatever that looks like, to really make sure you're capturing typos, but explaining why it matters. Because again, just going back to that, if you'd done something and had all sorts of typos and your boss saw that, you may think, okay, my boss, they don't say anything about it because they don't want to hurt my feelings. Well, I'd want to know about it and think about, okay, I really need to check things and proof. And so overall, it's really is this framework to think about why you've held back on feedback, to flip it, to think, okay, how would I feel on that side? And how can I then shape my feedback to show I'm shaping someone for this job and their career? And it can depend on the employee you're talking to and your relationship and all of those things. But then asking questions and really making it a conversation. And when you talk about it, say, okay, these are the things to follow up on. We'll talk about it in our next one-on-one. I just want to make sure I'm here to support you as well. Again, as people go down the line, it may be a different conversation. Someone's had repeated performance issues. But often we hold back on feedback when it's early on because it just feels a lot easier or less stressful, or you just assume it'll fix. But if you do hold off on it and it goes on and on and on, then it can feel a lot more formal later on, or you can be more frustrated and bring that to a conversation. And so when you have those thoughts in your head, rather than just holding off, thinking about how to have that and then having that conversation, pretty sure you'll feel a lot better about it, and you'll likely get to the bottom of it a lot quicker than you would have otherwise.